Welcome back. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying yesterday that she anticipates housing costs will come down, which will help bring inflation down to the Federal Reserve's 2% target. This after the Fed cut rates by 50 basis points last week. The 30-year fixed-rate mortgage also ticked down to a 2-year low last week. Now it is sitting at just over 6% right now. Joining me right now with the impact is the president and CEO of the Corcoran Group, Pam Liebman. Pam, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I was thinking about real estate, and I know, it depends on the geography and, what neighborhood you're talking about. But I was thinking maybe there would be a pretty good impact given the Fed cut rates 50 basis points. Are you expecting an impact?
So, Maria, I think it's certainly a step in the right direction. Everybody wants rates to go lower, but some of this was already baked in. But we do see a surge in buyers in a lot of places out there. So that's great news. I mean, the bad news is we have not enough supply still. So we could get this great rate cut, but people still need places to buy. And, one of the fears I have with the housing market is that we'll get more rate cuts, but is it going to spur home builders? Is it going to spur people who are locked into their mortgages to put more properties on the market? Great to have lower interest rates, but you need something to buy.
Well, and there's also the issue around taxes, right? I mean, you've talked in the past about all of the taxes and hidden taxes with regard to New York, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's expensive to buy a house. I say to people all the time, if you're stretching to buy that house, you really need to pay attention, not just to what the cost of the house is, but how much does it cost to buy in it? How much does it cost to live in it? Homeowners' dues have gone up, insurance, and after yesterday, who knows in places like Florida and the Gulf Coast there, what happens to insurance rates. So everything is expensive. So we need a lot more help on affordability for, people across the board.
Well, what's your take on this Kamala Harris economic policy proposal to provide first-time home buyers with a $25,000 down payment support? The co-director of the American Enterprise Institute's Housing Center writes an op-ed on this in the Journal, saying this plan would create more housing shortages and would, quote, stimulate demand but not supply and redistribute wealth to the sellers of existing homes. It's what you just said in terms of the supply being an issue. What would this $25,000 do, you think, Pam?
It's hard to say, hey, that's a bad idea to give people $25,000 on its face value. But when you dig into it, this is what happens. You're flooding the market with potentially $25,000 extra, which could be good to help people pay for their closing costs and all that. But it is likely, in my opinion, to drive up prices. And I'd rather see money being given as incentives and loosening up some of the government policies that don't allow home builders to get in there and get more housing built, both on the affordable side, which we are desperate for, and for regular people and first-time home buyers. So that's a lot of money to throw around. Is that the best way to throw around? I'm not an economist, but I would lean towards there's better ideas to create more supply. Demand is not our problem.
Yeah, I think this is great analysis, Pam, because once again, it's the supply issue, and that's where we need to see an alleviation, not necessarily $25,000 to help you with the closing costs. Pam, walk us through real estate and the outlook as you see it right now. I know it's different in different parts of the country, but specifically where you're doing business, whether it's New York or Florida, et cetera, what is your outlook and what are you seeing out there right now after the election and into 2025?
Great question. Right now, we're seeing an uptick in median and average prices in many parts of the country, particularly the markets that we're focused on, the hot markets of South Florida and of New York City. But we have we're sort of well below the moving average on getting new supply into the market. We're below the 20-year average. So again, that causes a problem, and it does cause prices to go up. So wouldn't it be crazy to think that next year we will see more houses being sold because we're coming off an all-time low practically, but we will likely see prices ticking up. And as things, as mortgage rates get lower, and if there is any kind of incentive and more buyers get into the market, the sad news is that, hey, I can finally buy, but it's going to be more expensive.
Wow. And we were talking earlier in the show, Pam, that rent is going up in New York. As of last month, the median asking rent price for apartments in all 5 New York City boroughs was $3,425 a month. That number nearly double the national median of $1,753 a month. Median rent in Manhattan is, and that's even down 2.25%, by the way, in Manhattan year over year, suggesting a decline in demand in the city's most expensive borough. In Queens and Brooklyn, rent is up 11% and 5.1%, respectively. If you want to rent in the biggest borough, Brooklyn, you need to make an estimated $151,000 a year just to afford renting. The Bronx is also the most affordable right now. The median rent just over $3,100 a month. Pam, how would you assess rent right now?
It's really people walking into these apartments and going into this crazy sticker shock, because we're talking about what numbers seem to be so high to other people across the country, and they're so disappointed when they see what they can get for that. But again, we have thrown so many people who cannot buy because of these policies into becoming renters. So more and more competition. The good news is it eased off a little bit, and the whole back to work and do I have to be closer to my office, we're watching that very closely as well. Very tough time to be a renter.
Yeah, it appears so. What areas of housing do you see as the most popular right now? Are apartment buildings more popular than townhouses right now? Tell me about New York with all of the crime and the migrants running around. Is that affecting things?
Well, people are definitely looking as to what area they feel comfortable in. If somebody is walking home from work or if they're taking the subway, safety becomes a big issue. This was not a question that we heard years ago, but in the past, you know how many years in New York City, we've had this sort of uptick in people's emotions towards a lack of safety. So certain neighborhoods where people used to just not even think twice, they're a little bit more hesitant. But with that said, New Yorkers are, brave souls, and they love their city, and they will go almost anywhere for an apartment that they could afford, especially all these young people who just want to have New York City as a place they can call home.
They still love New York City, even with the issues.
Those people do.
Yeah. Pam, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for the update.